Hey friends, welcome back to How to Grow My Small Business. I'm your host, Lindsay Fletcher, your relationship marketing and sales growth strategist. I teach women how to grow their network, market their business to attract the right leads, and close sales without feeling pushy or salesy, without working more, and without posting more. If you stick around long enough, I'll show you how to take intentional action so you can grow your small business. If you have been around for a while, thank you so much for joining me again this week. Hitting publish on these episodes is truly a highlight of my week. So thank you so much for being here and listening in and being a part of this community. If this is your first episode, welcome to the family. But I do need to tell you something, okay? This first episode is on me. And if you decide you want to listen to more, then we'll do a quick little gentleman's handshake, so to speak, and you'll hit the follow button on your favorite podcast app, okay? You hit follow, and I'll keep publishing episodes and sharing all the things that I've learned over the years so that you can grow your business faster and without working more. Do we have a deal? Okay, awesome. Okay, so today we are talking about continuing a conversation that we've been having on this podcast that matters a lot, like a lot, if you want to consistently bring in revenue. I'm talking about follow-up here, or as I like to call it, follow through, okay? So if you've ever had a great conversation with someone and you thought they would be a really great fit for what you have to offer, and then nothing happened, or you've ever felt awkward reaching back out to them because you didn't take the necessary steps in the sales conversation to set yourself up well, or you've ever wondered how many times is too many times, or when you should even follow up, right? Or if you've ever told yourself, if they want this, they would have gotten back to me. This episode is for you. Today, we're talking about 4 things to consider when following up with leads, because most people don't struggle with actually getting leads. And it's funny because people often think that they need more leads, but when we dig in a little bit more, they're actually struggling with closing out the sales cycle. And more often than not, women struggle with what happens after the conversation, that dreaded follow-up period, right? And I've shared this stat quite often, and I'm going to share it again here, okay? Only 2% of sales happen in the first contact or in one conversation, okay? So 2% of sales happen in one conversation or that one-time contact. And that means that if we are not executing in our follow-up, if we don't have a strategy in our follow-up, or if we don't have a system to follow up, we are losing out on 98% of sales, okay? Now, I don't expect you to close 100% of sales that you are having conversations with. That's unrealistic, okay? But some of those should be closed, okay? Some of that 98% we should absolutely be closing. So here's what you need to know. The vast majority of leads require patience and execution of a follow-up system. And if you aren't going to actually work your leads, you aren't going to close many sales, and you really will need more leads, which means you'll jump back on that social media hamster wheel of death where you're just posting and posting and posting and posting, right? Or that's what we think we need to do. Here's another stat to drive home the point. About 80% of sales require at least 5 to 12 follow-ups. Most people need 20 plus touch points. And that's something that I want to clarify in this episode is touch points versus actual intentional follow-up. I was recently asked a question inside my free online community about follow-up. You should join us if you're a female entrepreneur for sure. But I was asked about follow-up, and I want to dive into this a little bit more on this podcast episode. Before we dive into the 4 things that I want you to know about follow-up, I want to reset how we think about following up. Following up is not begging, it's not pestering or chasing or being annoying, okay? Follow-up is doing what you said you would do. It's providing clarity on a direction to take. It's supporting a decision to purchase from you or not to purchase from you, because there are going to be people out there that should not purchase from you, right? And you need to help lead them to that decision. It's also leading the process instead of being reactive or responsive. We are being proactive, right? We're leading the conversation. Now, when you don't follow through, what you're really doing is leaving people in limbo. And that is not the kind of leadership we want to portray. It's not the reputation that we want to build in our businesses. Okay. So I want to reframe follow-up as leadership and as service rather than begging or pestering or being annoying. Okay. So let's get into it. Okay, the first thing that we need to talk about are touch points versus direct intentional follow-up. And this is a place where people get confused in the follow-up process, okay? I just told you that the stat that it takes somewhere between 5 to 12 follow-ups to close 80% of sales. Now, if you're in the online space, it's probably more than that, right? Like probably somewhere around 20 or more touch points or follow-ups, okay? Now, we're going to use a combination of both of those, all right? And this is where a lot of business owners misunderstand what I mean. Not all touch points are created equal, okay? There's a big difference between direct, intentional follow-up where you are having a conversation with someone and indirect touch points, okay? So direct follow-up looks like a personal email, a text message, or a voice memo via text, right? A DM, a phone call, a Zoom conversation, for example. This is intentional one-to-one communication, okay? Indirect touch points look like your email newsletter, your podcast episodes, for example, social media posts, seeing you in the same Facebook group, them watching your stories, hearing your name come up in conversation, right? So here's the key thing that I want you to hear. Your social media and your email content are likely just a touch point where you are continuing to build trust or not. I mean, if you're not showing up there or you're not being consistent there, that may show someone that you are not doing what you say you're going to do, right? So someone listening to your podcast, someone that's opening your emails or liking your posts does not mean that you followed through or that you followed up. These are touch points that build trust between your follow-ups, between the conversations, but they don't close the loop, okay? And this is why people say things like, they're watching my stories, but they're not buying, or they're listening to my podcast, but they haven't booked with me yet, or they're opening my emails and they haven't responded, right? So that's not a sign to stop following up. It's a sign that they're warming up to you, but they haven't decided yet. And that brings me to the second thing that I want you to know, that your follow-up cadence starts by closing the conversation, okay? So number 2, follow-up cadence starts by closing the conversation. And this is something that I teach my sales students and my sales and marketing students because most follow-ups feel awkward because the conversation was never closed in the first place. So just as a reminder, closing the conversation means that you're creating a clear next step with a clear timeline that you both are agreeing to. Both you and your lead are agreeing to how you're going to move forward together, okay? So when you're closing the conversation, you aren't then later sending a message like, I'm just checking in, or I'm circling back, or I'm following up on my last email, right? Like that feels gross as the salesperson because you've left the conversation in an unclear manner. Nobody knows what to expect. And put yourself in their shoes. It feels gross to get a message like following up or circling back, right? Because your lead didn't know what to expect. They didn't know to expect a follow-up. And now their sales radar is going up and they're more likely to ghost you, okay? Here's the truth, right? Follow-up should feel expected, not intrusive, okay? That's why I like to think of it as follow-through because you've set the expectation in your conversation and you are simply following through with what you said you'd do and what they agreed to, okay? And that only happens when you close the conversation before it ends, all right? So as a reminder, closing the conversation doesn't mean closing the sale. It means agreeing to what happens next, who does what, and when you will reconnect. So an example might be like, why don't I send this over and we'll reconnect next Tuesday? Or let's touch base after you talk with your partner. How about Friday? okay? Or maybe I'll follow up in a week to see where you landed. When the expectation is set that you will follow up with them, your follow through becomes leadership, not pressure, okay? So let's talk about cadence now, because we've talked about closing the conversation, because your cadence is going to be set based on how you close that conversation, right? There's no one size fits all follow-up timeline, okay? Following up will depend on your industry, whether you have an online business or an in-person or maybe a brick and mortar. If you're selling something online, like a digital product, for example, your particular follow-up cadence might be set by an automated email sequence, for example, like an abandoned cart sequence, okay? If you own a business where you're actually having conversations in person or over the phone, in DMs or over emails, you should be closing the conversation and setting the expectation on the timeline, okay? So a few factors to consider in your follow-up or your follow-through cadence depends upon buying timeline, right? Like selling an existing home versus a new build changes the timeline. Do you see what I mean there? Like, make sure that you ask about their timeline in your conversations, when they expect to make the decision, when they expect to purchase. Those things will help you set your follow-up cadence, okay? Also, the level of urgency is something to consider. Is this a do or die type of situation? Like if you're a tax accountant and someone hires you to get their books up to speed and ready to file taxes this year, and it's January 2026, that's a little more urgent than starting bookkeeping for a brand new business, right? That maybe doesn't have many transactions yet, right? And then another thing to consider is the type of offer. If the doors to your workshop are closing this week, or maybe your clearance sale is ending this week, then you're going to need to pull up your big girl panties, right? You're going to need to put those on and get to taking action and actually following up with people. The other thing to consider, or the last thing to consider in this, is what was agreed upon. If you close the conversation properly, then you already know the answer to when you should follow up and how you should follow up, because you've already made an agreement with the other person, right? But generally speaking, immediate follow through matters, same day or next day, getting something back to someone as soon as possible. Momentum matters in the first 7 to 14 days, right? If they have made contact with you, that means they're interested enough to get into conversation with you, and make sure that you are staying in contact in that first 7 to 14 days, depending upon your conversations, right? And then follow through. Space it out based on the engagement and based on the clarity, right? Here's the key. The cadence should be intentional, not random. And if you're having in-person or online conversations, now I don't mean like click this link to buy my thing and then they go into an automated sequence if they don't buy your thing, right? I'm talking about like you're in the DMs, you're in conversation, you're in email, you're over the phone, whatever, right? Cadence should be intentional and individualized, right? And it should be intentional. And that leads me to the third point, and probably the most overlooked piece of the whole puzzle. You have to have an intention with each follow-up, okay? This is where most people get stuck, because they follow up with no clear intention other than trying to sell something and hoping that they buy, right? That's why it feels awkward. Every follow-through message should have one clear purpose, okay? And not all follow-ups are a buy now type of message, okay? Some follow-ups exist to clarify a question. Sometimes you might be reducing some uncertainty, confirming timing, reinforcing value. You could do it to support a decision, right? You could offer reassurance, or even create a clean yes or no, are you ready to move forward? Or is this still a priority for you, right? I want to say this clearly, and this is my tough love for this episode. If a lead comes to you, especially if a lead comes to you, they are interested in buying. Not following up, not following through makes you feel like you don't take your business seriously. It makes you look flaky. And honestly, it makes you look like you don't want their business. If you want uncommon results, you have to take uncommon action, okay? And leaving people confused or overwhelmed or stuck in indecision is not service, okay? Most people don't ghost you because they aren't interested. They ghost because life got busy. And remember, I've told you that we as women make about 35,000 decisions a day. 35,000 decisions a day, okay? So we are solving one of their many, many, many problems. And they've gotten busy and can't come back to it in their brain yet, right? Or maybe they feel unsure. You've left some questions unanswered. Maybe they didn't even ask them, but they aren't fully sure and they need more support from you. Okay, they need you to dig in a little bit more and ask some more questions about what's going on so you can really uncover where they might be stuck. Maybe it's because they don't know what to decide. You haven't shared enough social proof, or they don't believe that you are the one for sure that can solve their problem. Or they're avoiding an uncomfortable decision like they can't afford your product or service. And maybe they don't know how to tell you, right? Your follow through can actually be the thing that helps them move forward, even if moving forward is a not right now, right? That's okay. It's okay because clarity is a win. When you know where you stand, you can take action where it counts. And you'd rather know it's a no or a not right now than spin your wheels because you'd rather work on leads that actually make purchases, right? Your time is not infinite. Your time is finite and your time is precious, and you need to spend it where you'll actually make some traction, okay? Now, before we close out, I want to talk about some common follow-up mistakes that I want you to stop making if you're doing these, okay? If you're not, check, you're great, good to go. Okay, here are the mistakes in no particular order. Number one, following up one time and deciding it didn't work, okay? 5 to 12 follow-ups for 80% of your sales. Okay. The second thing is relying on content and visibility, relying on the algorithm to do your follow-up for you. Not all of your followers are going to see your content, no matter what algorithm you're trying to overcome. Okay. Whether that's social media, podcasting, emailing, not everyone on your list of followers is going to see your content. Okay. Number 3, changing offers or pricing instead of increasing your follow through. Close the conversation and increase your follow through. That will guarantee an increase in sales. Okay. Number 4, avoiding follow up because you don't want to be salesy. Following up is part of your job. Okay. I love you and it's part of your job. And then number 5 is confusing silence with rejection. If they have not said no yet, they have not said no yet, okay? And when they say no, or if they say no, we're gonna use the acronym next opportunity. Moving on. Good to know, on to the next, right? Most strategies don't fail because they're bad, okay? They fail because they weren't followed through with, or they weren't followed through with long enough. So you've got to stick to your follow-up. I guarantee you it will increase your sales if you increase your follow-up, okay? 2% of sales happen in one contact or one conversation. 98% do not. And 80% of sales require 5 to 12 follow-ups. So if you are not following up 12 times at minimum, you are not going to close more sales, okay? So here's what I want you to do after this episode. I want you to look at your open conversations, and I want you to ask yourself, did we agree to the next steps? Are they clear? Do we both know who is going to follow up and when and why? And is my follow through clear and intentional? Okay. And then what is the purpose of my next follow up or follow through? And then I want you to follow through with one conversation that you've been avoiding. Okay? Friends, you don't need to chase people. You need to lead them through the process. And following through is not pressure. It's professionalism, it's service, and it's stewardship. All right, let's do a quick recap before we wrap up this episode. First, we are going to recognize the difference between touch points and direct intentional follow-up. Second, Our follow-up cadence starts by closing the conversation and setting expectations. Third, each of our follow-ups are going to have a clear intention. And 4, we are going to stick to the system, we're going to stick to the strategy, and we are going to stop making the common follow-up mistakes that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. All right? Okay, friends, if this episode helped you, will you hit the follow button on your podcast app and then share this episode with a business friend? I know that lots of podcasters ask you to do this, but it really does help more people find this show. As always, I'm cheering you on to taking imperfect action that will create an income in your business and an impact in your community, wherever that may be. I'm praying for you and I'm praying for your business, and I'll talk to you next week.